into AI, or if you want to have a conversation to have that kind of like partner pushing back, this can be a way of kind of like getting all your thoughts out. And then kind of once you've kind of gotten them out, you can then ask a question like, hey, given the conversation we were having, just like what are some ideas for something I could write about, or how would you structure the piece to help you process ideas that way. You can also kind of turn research into relevance. So, some thing that you could do is like attach like an academic paper or an annual report from an organization or an industry report and ask like, what are some takes I could write about this paper? You could even kind of tell it like I want it to align with my organization's value of X, Y, or Z. And so I find that I actually engage with a lot more academic research now that I have the scaffold of AI, because it makes it easier to kind of like do a first pass reading, and then I can always kind of go more in depth if I want to. But I think this is a great source of ideas as well. And then finally, modeling from others. Like if you are kind of writing something and you're like, here's 3 articles I admire, like what makes them compelling? What is the common thread connecting them? And that could be something that you then choose to write about. Because it's a structure thing, AI is going to be very good at kind of finding that thread amongst them. Has anyone been using AI to find ideas for anything that has an example that they might want to share?
I mean, I ask it all the time. This is what's in my head. Is there anything that exists in real life? Like if we're designing an event and there is a vision, are there any actual rentals that can achieve this? I don't know if that's what you mean, but I do ask that stuff all the time.
Yeah, I like that, because essentially you're saying like, here's what, like help me figure out in the world, if in the world exists this thing that I'm imagining in my mind. Okay. And then when it comes to organizing thoughts, again, this is a place that AI is going to excel because it's conceptual, right? And so you've probably all had the experience of kind of dumping in meeting notes and getting them reorganized or an email. But I think kind of like thematic grouping, right, is the just basic level of like, what's the main point here? Group these points into key themes. If you are at a convening and you have like a bunch of sticky notes that people have written on, you can just take a snapshot of those sticky notes, and AI will kind of not only kind of transcribe them all for you, but kind of bucket them into themes for you. Right. And so sometimes the work of organizing the sticky notes is actually the work of human alignment, and you don't want to skip it. But sometimes you're in a room of 200 people and you would like to eat lunch and get the job done. There's also kind of structure and flow, right? So, like, what's the best logical order for these ideas is a question you can ask here. And then clarity check. So, something I'll ask from time to time, just depending on the piece, is like, what questions do you have for me about this piece? In order to make sure that it's not just resonating in my own mind, but that like someone else would understand it. And in general, I'll then ask AI to answer its own questions in order to kind of save myself the time of doing it, and then just look for the places where it's misaligned so that I can kind of focus on those, because those are the biggest spots of misalignment. And then finally, kind of like in the organizing bucket, you can ask things like, where's the argument weakest or strongest, or what's missing? And so that you're kind of getting that feedback from it. Oh, and then finally, and this is, I think, the most AI kind of, and this kind of relates to what you were just saying, Julie, but like, how does this connect out to the broader conversation? Who else is writing about this? Where kind of like, doing that work of taking what you're thinking about and connecting it to other people can take a ton of time, right? Whether it's a physical kind of vision that you have for your work as an event planner, Julie, or you're working on a piece of writing. I've also had somebody take this class who worked in HR for a tech company. And so she really used this to kind of, how do our policies connect to what people are saying in the, I forget what like online community that writes about this, but she found it really helpful for kind of like connecting out and kind of benchmarking for what they were doing. And then on the writing itself, I would say that kind of like this is probably one of my most used prompts is just like smooth this out, right? Smooth out this sentence or smooth out this paragraph. And I'm not giving it because we're in the exclamation point category. I'm not giving it the whole piece to do this with. I'm just giving it this one piece that feels rough. Like, help me smooth out this one piece. And in general, if I am doing some kind of like actual writing with it, I will make it go paragraph by paragraph rather than doing the whole thing. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is I just find that I maintain more control at the paragraph level. And then the other is the way that kind of like AI works is on statistical prediction of the next word of the text, right? And so the further out it's predicting, the kind of weaker it gets. And so by kind of working on a paragraph by paragraph basis, you're able to kind of maintain like a higher quality control than if you kind of have it write a whole piece. And kind of like it's made some assumptions in paragraph 2 that by the time you get to paragraph 4 don't make as much sense. And then again, if you go back to that heuristic of like AI is really good at conceptual things, introductions and conclusions are conceptual. And I myself am really good at writing an introduction. And then I feel like a child when I get to the conclusion and I'm like, in conclusion, and I just like summarize the things I've already said. And it can help you kind of conceptualize kind of like, okay, what are some ways I could extend this out into the world? What is kind of a way of ending in a way that elevates the piece? And so asking pointed questions to help give you ideas that you then might want to choose one to write about is something that I have found to be really helpful in working with AI. Is anyone doing one of these or something similar that they want to share their experience with? Yalda, you work in the storytelling space, so I feel like you have to have a perspective here.
Well, I also do research and try to tell storytellers how to write for young
Yeah.
people. And actually, I was just thinking, I just wrote up a study, and it's going to be published in a few weeks, and I don't have a conclusion. And I was like, yeah, I'll just end it. I won't have a conclusion, but now I'm going to go and take what I wrote and put it in and see what kind of conclusion AI writes. So
Totally. And I would ask it for like, what I typically do is I'll ask it for a couple of different options so that it's not just like AI's written a conclusion, but like I will say something like, what are some ways I could like elevate this piece in the conclusion? Like, give me some options. And then I'll generally write it myself. And then when it comes to editing, if you do want to kind of like have it edit the piece for you, I have a couple of suggestions here. One is like, I use this all the time. I will say, what suggestions do you have to improve this piece? List, don't rewrite. And the reason to do this is I don't want it to, again, I don't want it to do that full overwrite of me. I want it to kind of like give me kind of what it thinks I could improve. And I will then say like, 1 and 3 I agree with, 2 and 4 disregard. Like, then let's see what it looks like with kind of like those changes, right? And that way I'm kind of getting the minimal and aligned amount of change rather than kind of having to like read through a whole document and look for the, look at everything that changed, see what I like, feel annoyed that it changed things that I don't like. A number of people who've taken this course, I am not among them, like to just get a markup. So all of the tools, it's slightly different in each of them, but like all of them have a way of doing a markup for you, where when you give it a piece of writing, you can actually have it redline it rather than rewrite it. And so if you are someone who likes working off a red line or a markup, I want you to know that that exists for you. AI is also remarkably good at finding the best sentences in a piece, and there's a couple of reasons you might want to do this. One is kind of like you are like unsatisfied and you want to take the piece down to its studs, but you want to know kind of what are the things that are actually good to build on. Another is like if you do social media, right? So you're like, I need to kind of like bold some things and make some carousels of the most important parts. Can you like help me identify these? And so it's quite good at kind of spotlighting strengths quickly in writing. You can also, if you're feeling just kind of like a little bit stuck, ask for like, how would alternative author write, paste this text. I don't use this one very often. I think it was kind of popularized on the internet as like a neat thing that you could do with AI. I will occasionally reach for it if I'm just kind of like feel like I'm being too literal and I want to kind of have a, more poetic point of view and call on another author's style for that. But kind of in general, it's not one I reach for a lot, though it is one that some people like. So I'm sharing it for that reason. This one is one I do use, which are what are some ideas for a central metaphor I could use for this piece? Because again, coming up with a central metaphor is structural. You have to have a structural understanding of the piece in order to do that. So for example, the thing I said earlier about too much AI writing is like too much seasoning. It's bad. A little bit can be helpful and improve a dish, but too much ruins it. I asked AI for some options because like the first thing that came to mind when I was like thinking about that analogy was like too much plastic surgery is bad, but then I didn't want to like imply that a little bit is good. And so I was like, there's got to be a better analogy for this. And I was like, AI is on that case. And it gave me kind of like 6 different options. And I was like, oh yeah, seasoning's the one I want. Everyone who's like used seasoning, they know what that means. And it doesn't kind of say something I don't intend to say. And then finally, one thing I'll say is that AI will kind of iterate with you forever. And so I'll often find it helpful to just be like, here is the final draft, right? Only point out the things that need fixing, or only point out kind of like, the top 3 things you think I could or should change before hitting edit in 20 minutes, whatever kind of constraint I want to give it, but just making sure it knows that like, hey, just because I'm sharing this doesn't mean I'm ready to kind of fully take apart everything I've done. That's not where I am in the process right now. Has anyone already used one of these or have one they want to go use, having heard it?
I've used the first pass editing for cover letters as I'm applying to jobs because I don't want it to take away from my voice, but I do want to have it flag areas where there may be like key gaps that are missing, just to further enhance it.
Totally. That's a great place, right? Like you don't want to put the wrong foot forward where it's like very clearly AI writing. But you want to make sure that you're using it as a tool. Yeah. Anyone else?
I guess maybe for final polish, sometimes I'll ask like, is this clear and does it make sense? And sometimes they'll be like, yeah, what you wrote, like this and this sounds good, but maybe you should bullet point this or bold this. So
yeah. Yes. That makes sense. And then the final thing I'll say, if anyone is, I don't know if anyone here has to distribute their writing at all, but I will say AI is very good at these things because again, it's kind of like, it's got all the context of the piece. So then it's going to be very good at coming up with like titles of things. Like I will never write a subject line again in my life unless it just like comes to me naturally. Similarly, if you write like a newsletter and you need a 1-sentence preview text for the newsletter, that's going to be something AI is very good at. And then oftentimes if you've taken the time to write something, whether it's, your organization's report or a proposal or for a piece of work or an essay, like you then want to talk to people about it, right? And so you can actually kind of have AI help you prepare to talk to people about it if that's a place where you feel like you need support. And you can even have it kind of ask like, what questions might a stakeholder ask me about this piece? So that you kind of are prepared for those. And you can, again, have it even answer its own questions if you want to, in order for it to provide those back to you. Okay. So I wanted to just like share again, like one more example of kind of like how AI recently helped me finish an essay I was working on, which is like similar to the LinkedIn, like let myself write a truly rough draft, right? So again, it's canon writing advice to get the down draft down. And this was something that I was able to kind of like actually let myself do in a way that I previously wouldn't have been able to. I then asked AI to help clarify the main point I was making. I felt like I had like 3 or 4 points and I wasn't sure what the through line is. And again, that's going to be a place where AI is very good at that architecture. And then worked with it to outline a better structure. So I was like, okay, like let's actually get a good structure for it. And then another piece of canon and writing advice is to kill your darlings, right? So those sentences or turns of phrase that you fell in love with, that you feel are just right, that are so hard to take out. But because I now had a good sense of the structure I was working for, I could actually kind of like be like, actually, this doesn't serve it. And so I was able to actually operate more effectively in that way. And then, kind of similar to what Yalda is going to do for homework, I was able to connect it out to the broader discourse more easily, to make it kind of like, sit in the context of other writing. Yeah, Yaldo.
Did it identify the darlings or did you?
I did. But you could also ask it, like, what are the things that I seem to attach to about this piece? Or where do you suspect that, I should cut that I'm not cutting? All of those things. Yeah. And then that helped me conceptualize a conclusion that didn't just recap. And then I think this is kind of like the big difference is I was able to write this in a single day, whereas previously I would have had to kind of spend like a week putting it away, taking it back out again, or finding somebody else to edit it. And I think it's still super valuable to have human editors, but kind of they're not always available, whereas kind of like AI is open 24/7. So I think the irony of kind of what I have just outlined is that I actually think great writers get more out of AI than struggling ones, right? Because you better understand your writing, you're more able to identify kind of pinpoint where you want help, and you can identify kind of what's bad and take that out. And so rather than being kind of a tool that kind of like eliminates the need for writing, I actually think it elevates writing, and does so disproportionately for people who are already great writers. So, with that, I'm going to give you guys a minute to put in the chat, what is a takeaway that you have from today? Yeah, these are great. Each week, I'm going to give you guys an assignment and I'll email it to you as well, so don't feel like you need to copy it down. And then if you email it to me, I will, tell me what you did and how it went. And if you have any questions, I will kind of email you back if it seems relevant. And then we'll start kind of our next class by kind of sharing a few examples and any lessons learned. And so for next week, if it's relevant to you, I think it can be helpful to actually talk about what is writing, and writing, exclamation point, for your team or organization. I know some of you work kind of connected to education, so I'll add that kind of like, I think a lot of the problem with like how students use AI is that they do exclamation point activities as if they're lowercase activities, right? The problem isn't that they're using AI, it's how they're using AI for the task at hand. And it's the same for adults in the workforce. And so your next piece of homework is to just follow the FCAGE process for a piece of writing, right? And so make sure that you frame the task, give it context, align. So Yalda, this was, I think, one of your takeaways was like, ask me any questions you have before you start doing this activity, right? And that really does ultimately save a lot of time because it makes sure AI is going to go in the right direction before it generates a draft and you edit it. And then finally, it's to do one of these two things. Either use the 3-draft method for something, right? Where you draft by hand, AI drafts, and then you edit by hand, right? So like what we did with the LinkedIn post, or to deploy some of the pointed strategies that we went through in the exclamation point. And all of these strategies will be in the user guide that I send, so you don't need to kind of rewatch the whole recording to find them. And so my kind of takeaways for you guys are, first is that writing is still a process, right? It's not like there's some magic button that takes all of the work out of it. I think AI just opens up new collaborative options to kind of help you kind of get to your destination faster. Whether that destination is about clarity because it's lowercase writing, or it's about expression because it's exclamation point writing. And how you use AI should change with the stakes, right? And so when you're writing an FAQ, I am not taking the same approach as when I'm like writing a proposal for something that I really care about, where I want to make sure that people understand kind of like me or my voice or my perspective in some way. And then this one will show up many times across our conversations, but like a colleague, AI benefits from a sense of your goals, having the context, and a chance to ask questions before starting a task. Just like, this is true whether you're working on it with quantitative analysis, which we'll talk about in a few weeks, or whether you're talking about writing, but it just like kind of that, kind of kickoff conversation you would have with a colleague where it's kind of like, hey, here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's what our goal is. Here's some context. What questions do you have? Like that's that same process working with AI. And then kind of, if you take anything from kind of like the writing side of it, it's just this heuristic of like AI excels at the conceptual and it flattens the concrete. And so kind of if you're trying to kind of like think about something conceptual, AI, great go-to place. If you're trying to get a list of adjectives that you could use instead of the one you're currently using, AI, not super helpful. All of the things that kind of make kind of writing gritty, textured, interesting, it's not particularly good at. But anything that's kind of like organization, metaphorical, conceptual, extremely good at. And then finally, like I like my, some people are like really hesitant to use it for writing because they're like, is it cheating? And, kind of again, you have to use it within whatever guidelines are given to you. But ultimately, my view is like, you're responsible for your writing. And it's your job to ensure AI enhances and not flattens your voice and perspective. And so if your name is on something, kind of you are responsible for it, whether you used AI or not. And so as long as you're willing to kind of take that responsibility, kind of I think that like partnering with AI can be the seasoning that helps improve your writing, rather than kind of the over salting that ruins it. So that's what I've got for you today. We've got about 5 minutes if people have questions they want to ask or things they want to share.